Hey everybody, what's happening? I've been a minute. I missed a week because because life conspires, and in my case, this is a unusual summer. This summer is the summer between my son's junior year in high school and his senior year in high school, and that can be busy because I tend to like to get a hold of things early. Um, and so we started last fall looking at colleges. His junior year, let's start looking at schools. And we saw a number of them, and that's gone into this summer. But this summer now, you're working on, we're getting him some SAT prep, which is probably unnecessary, but we're covering all the bases, right? So we're gonna get that. He's got some help in writing a college essay. He's working on that. He's taking some summer courses at one of the schools that he's probably the number one school, the school that he likes the best, and we'll see how that goes. We have seen all sorts of schools. We have seen art schools. Well, my guy is a lot like me. Poor kid. To his detriment, he's a lot like me, but he doesn't have the musical bug. He has an graphic design, film, digital arts, where it all comes together. You know, he is a product of his time and his generation, and he's a deep in the weeds guy. So he, if he never had to leave his room, he'd never leave his room, right? He's one of those guys. He's not hugely social. He's very fun, can be a lot of laughs, but he's into his thing, and he would spend all his time doing it. So I wasn't that dissimilar. So yeah, we've spent a lot of time going to see a lot of schools, and like I say, it's art schools, but there's also major universities that have. He's looking. I think it's more graphic design at this point because he took a graphic design course last year and it really resonated with him, But I do think that's a jumping off point. We'll see where it all goes. To some degree, he might be he loves logos, and he loves advertising. And that, who knows where all this, look, he's 17, he's not going to know now, and he doesn't have to know now. But finding the right school is a big deal. So we've been going to a lot of schools. And yeah, the last time in the past couple of weeks, went down to Washington, saw George Washington University, and American University. And it was really hot in Washington, and we went and saw that. And one of the things that's intriguing about that was these are good schools, and they're good sized schools, and they offer a lot, but they weren't talking about that. The only thing they were talking about, I was amazed by this, and I wasn't alone in this, talked to parents of other people on the tour going, "Are you noticing?" They're like, "Yeah, we're noticing." Look, when you go there, right? These are Washington, D.C. based schools, right? It's all about, we get the proximity, right? They're in D.C. And that's what they're selling to you. And they're not selling anything else. You're going to get an internship on the Hill. And isn't it marvelous? Isn't the most wonderful thing? Okay. Now look, if you're a poli-sci major, it probably is the most wonderful thing. But there's a huge disconnect between what they're sort of telling you the school is about, which I think is accurate about this big university with all these different programs, all this stuff. But when you get there, all that, we're going to talk to you about, it's all about poli-sci. And I was surprised the degree of that. I got it American, and I got it again at George Washington. I did not go to Georgetown. I know people who went to Georgetown, and they said, we got the same thing. It was interesting. And made him sit there and go, they don't care about me. And I'm like, you know what? I think you're right. I think this is a school that your subject matter is not front and center. But we've gone to all sorts of, we went to Savannah College of Art and Design. We've been to Syracuse, which has an incredible communications department. Emerson College. I could go on and on. Seen a lot of schools. So that's where I've been in the last week or so, and it's just slowed things down, being able to get to you all and talk to you guys. And there's some other things. And this episode is going to be a little bit of a catch-all. This is going to be, to a degree, a house cleaning episode, because there's a lot of things all sort of going on. and they're all sort of converging, and I think they are at least somewhat interrelated. So, yeah, let's dive in. Here's one. Let me get you a quotation. Assuming I can track it down. Yeah. I'm an enormous Carl Sagan fan. Excuse the glare from the tablet. I got into Sagan as a 14-year-old when Cosmos came out. And all I did was watch it. And Sagan became an extraordinarily, let's try it again. Extraordinarily, yes, extraordinarily, an extraordinarily important human. A lot of things I was grasping for and maybe not able to come to, all those thoughts sort of crystallized hearing Sagan. So, and I followed him and just thought Sagan was was just brilliant. And one of the things I do with a lot of people who I've read or admired is especially if they make any kind of predictions, and I do this all the time. I do it in the short term. I do it in the popular culture. I love when people predict things online. Go, okay, let's see how the prediction went. Because I try not to get into the predicting biz. And if you do, to be very careful about it. Because the point isn't to just say something. The point is to be accurate, right? You judge the predictor by their ability. You just keep score. You see if their prediction came out. I was a huge fan of Sagan, and Sagan was, besides all of his astrophysical things, he was also quite a critic of the culture. We needed to raise our standards, and it was a thing that people were talking about a lot back then. I remember hearing it in high school about the dumbing down of America, and I agreed with it. My dad talked about it. My dad was an English teacher once upon a time. And my dad talked about it an awful lot. And we really did believe it was something that was happening. And one of the interesting things about my now advanced dotage, that is to say, this is really highlighting the glare here, is really highlighting the gray in the beard. This is great. One of the things, listen, I'm 57 years old. So am I some old guy? No. I guess that would be 77 years old. Or, I'm not there, but I'm certainly not 34, 35 either, right? And I try very hard not to get caught up in being a person that's saying things because of your age. I thought the same thing when I was 14 and 16. I didn't want to be the angry young man too much because it was so easy to peg you as being the angry young man. So I've tried always to try to avoid the pitfall of falling for giving someone the excuse to say, oh, you're just a product of your generation. Now that I'm in this place, I'm going to get oh, you're just telling everyone to get off their lawn. Oh, you're a boomer. I'm not a boomer. I'm Gen X, but that's, okay, maybe by a year or two. I think that's all I make Gen X by, but doesn't matter. I'm still Gen X. But you try to not fall for those sort of things. But I do watch the predictions that people make, and I do keep score. And because I have this now time, as much as time is your enemy, right? Time can also be on your side. Time for me can be on my side because I have a long time to look back and go, oh, let's look at all the predictions. Who got it right? And remember all the things that were said, especially by politicians and so forth. Let's see who was right. Let's see who was wrong. And let's see a connective line, some connective tissue between the people who got it right and the people who got it wrong. Who was getting it right? Why were they getting it right? If they were. So one of the reasons I got into jazz music as a musician, I love jazz and I love classical music, but I was interested in playing, and playing jazz was just more fun to me and more creative to me. But I felt that there was a dumbing down in music as well that was going on. We were saying how great bubblegum was, which wasn't fantastic. Anyway, What I'm trying to get to is that these ideas aren't necessarily new, but they were being said a lot in the 80s, and then going into the 90s. Journalism started to fall by the wayside. You think journalism is basically doesn't exist now, and I would agree with you on that, which is terrible. Terrible for democracy, terrible for our ability to just understand our world. When it increasingly started to become more and more sensationalized, it became more and more yellow journalism. That started happening in the early 90s. When they got rid of the fairness doctrine was the beginning of it. News divisions suddenly had to be profit centers. Go watch broadcast news from many, many years ago. You get a real interesting idea about it. Anyway, with all that, keep that in mind. Check this out. Here's this great quote. It's a movie, not a movie, from the book The Demon Haunted World by Carl Sagan, late Carl Sagan. I believe this was 95. It would have been just before he, soon before he passed away. I might be wrong. Might have been a little earlier than that. Might have been a little earlier. Might have been earlier 90s. Might have been 92. Anyway, let's take a look. Here's the quote. Science is more than a body of knowledge. It is a way of thinking. I have a foreboding of an America in my children or grandchildren's time, when the United States is a service and information economy, where nearly all the key manufacturing industries have slipped away to other countries, when awesome technological powers are in the hands of a very few, and no one representing the public interest can even grasp the issues, when the people have lost the abilities to set their own agendas or knowledgeably question those in authority, when clutching our crystals and nervously consulting our horoscopes, our critical faculties in decline, unable to distinguish between what feels good and what's true. We slide almost without noticing, almost without noticing, back into superstition and darkness. It's a hell of a quote. Now you may sit there and go, come on, one guy, gifted insight, right? It was kind of fluky. He certainly didn't claim to see the future. But what I would want you to understand is, I remember reading that at the time and saying, that rings true. I hope he's wrong, but it rings true. And here's the other thing, he wasn't the only one saying it. Again, there were tons of books and all sorts of things throughout that decade of the 80s and then going into the 90s warning us of this. But if you listen to Frank Zappa or heard Frank Zappa, who was pretty far away from Carl Sagan, you'd be getting very similar messages about what a mess it was. And he didn't see it going back the other way. Very concerned. You like comedy? You would have been maybe listening to George Carlin. Carlin talked about it all the time. Had seen it happening during his lifetime. Was not crazy about humanity. This was not good what he was seeing go down. So it's not like, gee, really? That Carl Sagan guy? Who is he? We get a lot of that these days. But if you're fairly, before, I know people say, well, I wasn't around for Carl Sagan, I wasn't around for Bertrand Russell. I know what he said. I wasn't around for Alfred North Whitehead. Familiar with Alfred North Whitehead? I was, right? I know about things that happened pre-Paul McCartney. It's possible to simply be well-read and know these things. It should be a normal standard. Anyway, the point is that, we saw it coming. And we are a mess. This is about as bad as I've seen the culture ever be. However, here's my one caveat for you. My caveat is, yes, it's a mess. And yeah, it's bad. However, it's always been a mess. Always. I've never lived through a period of time. I wonder where that great, Shangri-La, that city on a hill, all that stuff. I never saw that. It's always been a mess. But it's a relative term. How much of a mess? This mess is particularly bad because we do seem to, we can't tell fact from fiction. We've lost those faculties. It's really, 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 really bad. And this leads, unfortunately, to all sorts of things going on in our world, and to a degree to politics, which is something I really didn't want to get into here. Before I get into politics, and again, this is the catch-all episode, thought I'd throw another one at you. And this is related to politics, because these days just about everything is. And here's the thing, before we decry it, almost everything has to be. Every decision we make is based on our values. No matter what choice you make, you're culturally voting for something. You're affirming, I am with that as opposed to being with that. Here's mine. I just quit Twitter. I liked Twitter. When Twitter was working well, it could be spectacular. You could get all sorts of insight, all sorts of people talking to each other who really knew stuff. It was a great source. Properly curated, it could be, listen, you want to look for junk, it could turn into a cesspool. But properly curated, you could find some really, really good information there. Good writers, good opinion people. Again, people making predictions and finding out that they were right so that you knew who to listen to. Musk, wow. I always thought he was a little bit of a crank. But I figured I really didn't think he was this deranged, I suppose. Or maybe it's just the ego. And I didn't think he was that much of I wouldn't have thought going in that this is a guy who wouldn't be an apologist for some ultra-right stuff. But he is again and again and again. At a time when the ultra-right stuff is particularly dangerous, he keeps leaning into that. That's ugly. So I did get off there because I don't want to be part of his. I can't support it. I saw the Threads thing blow up. Okay. And you gotta, look, it's gotta be really bad. The number one evil billionaire must really be bad when you go running as fast as you can into the clutches of, the second most loathsome billionaire and decide that must be a good place. So I did the Threads thing, like many folks did. It was the first time, and it was well played because he could he could pour it over Instagram users. It was going to take something seismic like that to make it happen. Now, I know the user has come down, but it seems to be a much better situation over there. And most of the good news things and insight could still be gleaned there like you used to be able to do it on Twitter. And since Twitter doesn't even want to be Twitter and it's changed its name now and it's going to be this other thing because he's going to make it, the super app, which I don't think is going to happen, but that's what he's going to try to do. Okay, fine. Somebody else can be Twitter. And they seem to be doing a pretty good job of that over there. So I'm over there. And then we've got the politics going on. Let me throw it at you this way. I score politics on a 0 to 100 scale. If you're at, let's see, how to do this for you guys. Okay, so trying to figure out how I'm going to do this. Okay, let's make this 0. 0 is you're all the way. I'm trying to make sure I'm looking at this. How am I going to explain this? Okay, I'm just going to go at it. I look at it as a 0 to 100 scale. And at 0, okay, I'm going to do it this way. At 0, you are the ultimate fascist. All right, and at 100, you are you've got your crystals out, and you're so far to the left that you've lost. You've taken total leave of your senses. With the idea that both extremes are basically, functionally at least, basically crazy. Okay. And then that would lean to one sit there and go, it's a bell curve. And in the middle, the perfect centrist, the 50%, that must be sanity. And that must be, okay. I actually don't think that. I think it's asymmetrical. And I think it works more like not something that does this perfectly, but something that does something more like this. It goes all the way one way, and then there's a cliff. I would put sanity on this 0 to 100 scale, where the ultimate leftist is 100 and the ultimate fascist is 0. I would put, Democrats or Republicans split around 50. I would put sanity around the number 80. But I think just beyond that, there is a steep drop-off down to 100 where you get the crazy people. Most Democrats get scored around a 60 or a 70 perhaps. Maybe a few get up to 75 or 80. But I would think of myself as around 80 or 82. I'm right on that edge, and I readily admit this. Before I think it starts to go a little, but I think I'm generally left of Democrats. I'm not a wild-eyed liberal. I'm not a communist. I'm not a socialist, because I don't think it works. It's as simple as that. I believe in making money. I think making money is fine. But I think the other side is just mired in all sorts of things that confuse them. Their religion. I'm a flat-out atheist, so their religion, I think makes it, they're running philosophically, they're running Bronze Age ideas on a modern computer. I think that software doesn't run. So I think they're a mess. I think they are virtually incapable of coming to the right answers, and they don't. They seem to do it all the time. But my own guys definitely don't push back hard enough. And although I probably vote for the Democrats, I'm not a Democrat. They screw it up just too many times. The other day, Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia was talking about the passage of a military budget, and the House had one version of this and the Senate has another, and so they're going to have to negotiate. And he was saying, I don't think the Republicans are going to, hold up the safety of the country over culture issues. They're not going to do that. And I felt like shaking the man and saying, Tim, that's all they do. They've been doing it for years. You don't think they're going to do that. You're a United States Senator. You're supposed to be on my side. You're that dim. And I don't think this is a stupid man, but the blinders are on. Refuses to understand that this is a fight and he's up against some very, very bad folks. These folks they want to tear it all down. They want to burn it all down. They say so, they act so, and they still can't bring themselves to believe that anyone could actually do that. So that wing of the Democratic Party, I have no, Chuck Schumer, Merrick Garland sitting on his hands for a year when needed to be moving on stuff. Extraordinary. And it leads to another idea. I hate even to talk about it, but Trump is probably going to get the Republican nomination. And there's a good 30% of the country who's behind him. All right? And they do feel aggrieved. And they should feel aggrieved to a degree. They sit there and go, hey, my values, my racism is trying to be stamped out, and my, all my privilege is trying to be stamped out. And you go, yes, they should feel aggrieved that their racism and their privilege is trying to be stamped out, and it should be stamped out. Nothing tough about that. Everyone's doing cultural engineering here. Everyone's pushing something. The liberals will say, oh, we're not trying to take your guns and we're not trying to take your stuff. Really? Why not? Ought to be. Absolutely, we should be doing all that. So there is a cultural fight going on here. And there's a reason that 30% feels the way they do. But here's the thing. Their guy is an out-and-out crook 90 times over. He probably might get indicted this week. It might go into August. It's hard to say where this is really at. I've heard there were still going to be witnesses going for another 2 or 3 weeks, so who knows? I don't think the Georgia case is going to be big. I think the federal case, J6 case, will be big. I don't think the Florida case. Let's say they get him in the Florida case. You think Judge Cannon is going to suddenly sentence him to something? For the sake of the nation, we have decided to give him a suspended sentence. So I don't see that. There are 2 cases that are important. You need a state case, you need a federal case. Georgia and New York are the 2 cases that got to go. But those folks, Trump may very well be out of his mind. I thought he's been out of his mind for many, many years. Listen, I lived in New York City, and I thought Mayor Giuliani was a fascist when he was Mayor Giuliani, which he sort of was. Just wasn't saying he was. He just wasn't advertising it particularly well. But here's the thing. Trump is out of his mind, but no one wants to say that, right? You can't say that he's out of his mind because he hasn't been diagnosed by a doctor, and therefore you should not say that. And I agree, and that nuance matters, okay? However, in any functional sense, is there a functional difference between believing crazy ideas? Let's say you're a QAnon person, right? You buy I'm sure Flat Earth, name all your crazy stuff, and they buy into all of it, right? But that same person pays their bills on time, is able to function, raises kids, does not act insane. They're not insane, but bad ideas possess them. Crazy ideas sort of own them. Okay? So, what's the difference in any functional, practical sense? If you're being owned by the crazy ideas, if you listen to whatever the crazy person tells you, you're an agent of the crazy. You may not be crazy, but you work for the crazy. You're pushing the crazy agenda. You're an ally of the crazy. Doesn't that kind of make you crazy too? In a political sense, in a practical sense, yeah, absolutely. Is it an important difference? Yeah, it's an important difference. I don't want to say, hey, a third of the nation is crazy. Although, it's interesting because psychologists don't want to tell you what crazy. They won't say it. They'll have every name in the book for every guy. But there is no sanity. We're only sort of marginally well adjusted. That's as good as it gets. So, yeah, I think we've got to talk about this sort of stuff. And I don't like one of the reasons I remain an independent. The guys I want to talk about all this stuff, guys I think are on the right side of history, and I'm with the Democrats on that, they're not talking about it because they were the inventors of politically incorrect, right? They were, there's things that we don't say. It's not good. It's not healthy. I'm a huge free speech advocate. So you go, oh, you're with the Republicans on that one. No, I'm not. Because the Republicans believe there is no limit to free speech. And there are limits to free speech. Fire in a crowded movie house, Oliver Wendell Holmes. We again, don't get to this extreme case. We can be somewhat reasoned about this. And this has been litigated already again and again and again and again. But I think there's something to be said. It's painful to talk about all sorts of issues, and we don't want to hurt people, and so we're careful in our language. Okay, but that can go too far. We still need to be adults and grow up and talk about the real tough stuff. No matter, and it will be uncomfortable. Doesn't matter. We got to, if the choice is because you start to go down that slippery slope. I don't think you can do it. So, boy, we've gotten heavy tonight. So all of these things that happen, I'm following the politics. And I'm a news hound, so I do check out all that stuff. I'm very involved musically, fear not. That's not, hasn't disappeared. But I think one of the things I think I'm figuring out, and maybe this is the episode in which I figure it out, is that to a large degree, what I think we might need, and what I think this channel might provide, is I think we need a degree of cultural criticism. I think you need the ombudsman, the cultural critic. I think that's good. I think that's healthy. Now you could be a critic and hate everything. I don't want to be that guy. I don't think I'm that guy. But yeah, I think there's something to be said. You know, I'm a musical person, but we're not going to probably talk music all the time because we live in the world. So the artist's perspective on that whole world, you don't have to be skewed off so far off that you don't have any contact with the world. I like having one foot in the real world. I always have. I like seeing what's going on Main Street. I want to know what's going on. You know, I want to know what the thought, the zeitgeist, I want to know what that is. I had other stuff to hit, but I haven't got the time to do it because I've been going off now for half an hour. So I think I'm going to call it quits. I will tell you this, go see Oppenheimer. It's brilliant. This is a director at the height of his powers. Fantastic cast. Murphy is incredible. It's not a documentary. You're not going to see a documentary on the making of the bomb. It's about him. And this is an imperfect person. Brilliant, but imperfect. No shame in that. And there had to have been moral struggles, and there were moral struggles. And compare his moral struggles to some of the people who were his detractors, and it works on so many levels. It does so many things well. It's one of the best films I've seen many years. It really, really, really is worth your time. But it's a deep dive, and it's 3 hours. I think the 3 hours fly by pretty quick, but it's 3 hours, and it's Nolan, and you know what you're going to get. But it's excellent filmmaking. So go see it, kids. Open up your mind. Expand your mind. Do that. All right. Hopefully, in a week, I think I've got more to talk about. I think the thing to talk about next will be, I think I want to dive into not having to like every genre of music. That you're allowed not to love everything and be a musician. That'll get good. I'll definitely piss off all sorts of people. Great. I'll get to be called a snob again. But hey, that's okay. So that's what I got for you. Lots going on. Lots to think about. And hey, listen, like, comment, subscribe. And, if you want to help me out, I appreciate it, because I think this could get more views. I think there's more to check out. I think people check this out and go, hey, that Dave guy, he's all right. I just need to get out there. I just need y'all to check me out. All right, guys, I will catch y'all, I would guess, in a week. And I hope these dog days of summer are wonderful to you. Peace.